Alright, so we all know what's going on with the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard case, right? Johnny Depp is suing Amber Heard for defamation to the tune of $50 million over an op-ed Amber Heard wrote in 2018 for the Washington Post. Amber Heard tried to get the case dismissed, but it didn't work, so now she's countersuing for $100 million. And that's what we're all watching play out right now. And when I say all, I mean all. Apparently we're more interested in this case than, abortion rights getting taken away, Russia versus Ukraine, COVID, Elon Musk buying Twitter, etc. But our tendency to fixate on celebrity news isn't the point of today's video. The point of today's video has to do with an unexpected turn that this whole saga took last week. So if you haven't been following, it turns out that most people are on Johnny Depp's side. I mentioned this in my video about the importance of waiting, but at the very least this trial has shown that some of the claims that Ms. Heard had made against Johnny Depp were unsubstantiated. And at best, she lied about those claims, and at worst, she herself is the abuser in this situation.
I'm sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, but I was hitting you. It was not punching you. Babe, you're not punched.
Don't tell me what it feels like to be punched.
You can please tell people that it was a fair fight and see what the jury and judge think. Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them, Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence, and
yes.
It's a fair fight. And see how many people believe or side with you.
But again, the whole point of that video was to say that it's important to wait until all the information has come out before you make any definitive conclusions. And if you are going to speculate on something as it's happening, it's important to acknowledge that your opinions may change if and when new information comes out about the situation, and that you may ultimately be wrong. And so in order to hold true to that principle, I'm not going to make any conclusive statements about this case. All I can say is that the information that we got in 2016 and 2018 from Amber Heard does not match the objective evidence that we have now, and that is not a good look for her. And so understandably, the majority of people are on Johnny Depp's side. But on the internet, taking a side doesn't just mean supporting your team, it also means humiliating the other. And so because of this case, Amber Heard has become a meme, and this became the point of focus for the mainstream media. Last week, most of the popular news outlets posted opinion pieces calling out these online attack campaigns against Ms. Heard. Everyone from internationally acclaimed news outlets like CNN and The Guardian to more pop culture and tabloid sites like Vanity Fair and The Cut. And a lot of these articles went so far as to straight up defend Amber Heard. And the main points that the mainstream media was making were that essentially mocking and ridiculing Amber Heard in this situation is akin to mocking and ridiculing actual victims of domestic abuse. And also that all of this ridicule is just going to make it harder for people to come forward in the future about their domestic abuse claims because this is what they're going to face. And to put things bluntly, the internet was having none of that. So I first ran into this whole situation by accident last week when I opened up my web browser and an article from The Cut about this case was advertised to me. And the article was called, "Which Women Do We Choose to Believe?" Now, I hadn't really been paying close attention to the case, but I did have a general idea how it was going. And so I thought this article would give me just a little bit more insight into what people were thinking about this case, in case I'd missed something. And I have to say that after I got done reading it, I wasn't very impressed. It just seemed that instead of focusing on the case itself, they were just focusing on the dynamic of powerful man and less powerful woman. And it just seemed like they were trying to liken this case to all the other popular cases with a similar dynamic, like the case against Harvey Weinstein and the case against Bill Cosby, etc. And like I said, I hadn't really been paying very close attention to the case. And so after I got done reading, there was a part of me that was like, oh wow, is this how this case is being perceived now? And so I went down to check the comments to confirm, and it turns out that's not the case at all. The overwhelming majority of the comments in response to this article were in disagreement with this article. One piece of one of the top comments that pretty much sums up the rest of the comments says, "Please stop framing us as bimbo Depp fans and give us the respect of being intelligent human women who are following the trial and the mountain of conflicting evidence that is coming out as it goes on. What she is doing is incredibly harmful to women and incredibly hurtful to actual domestic violence survivors." And so the sentiment was pretty clear that most people don't actually agree with what the mainstream media is putting out right now about the case. Now, I didn't think too much of the article until later on when I was watching Philip DeFranco. And apparently enough news sources had written articles in this same vein, and it was creating such a problem that he had to cover it. But even the comments under his video were very similar in tone to the comment that we just read from the Cut article, with the top comment reading, "Nope. As a victim of SA, I'ma laugh at Heard all I want. I'm not laughing at all the people who have spoken up about abuse. I'm laughing at all the people who lie about abuse. The further we get into the case, the more evident it is that she's lying, and it throws the shadow of doubt on all of us who aren't lying. And there was another comment reading, as someone who tried to stay as neutral and as open-minded in the Johnny Depp vs. Amber Heard case for as long as possible to try and hear testimony from both sides, it is clear and supported by evidence that Amber is both an abuser and a liar. In my opinion, the memes aren't making fun of abuse, but of Amber being a blatant liar. Johnny's closing audio clip of her saying, "Go tell the world you're a male domestic abuse victim, see who believes you," is chilling. It's little wonder the internet is hoping for her downfall. And so this whole situation presents a dichotomy. On one side, you have the mainstream media saying the joking, mockery, and ridicule is harmful because it's essentially making fun of current domestic abuse victims while simultaneously making it harder for them to speak out in the future. And on the other side, you have social media saying the joking, mockery, and ridicule is acceptable in this situation because 1, Amber Heard is lying, 2, the jokes aren't targeting domestic abuse in general or domestic abuse victims, they're specifically targeting Amber Heard and her lies, and 3, her lies are doing way more damage to domestic abuse victims than their jokes ever could. And so while I agree with social media's arguments in response to the mainstream media's allegations, in that no, laughing at Amber Heard isn't akin to laughing at all domestic abuse victims, and that lying about domestic abuse does way more damage to the actual victims of it than someone joking about someone else lying about that domestic abuse could ever do. I do also think that the mainstream media overall has a point in that the meme-ification, or the diminishing of these public events to pure entertainment for the purpose of either mocking, ridiculing, or joking about the people involved, is potentially problematic. Again, I think that the points that they're using to demonstrate this idea are completely unfounded, but that doesn't mean that the idea itself is without merit. So as usual, after the mainstream media made its stance clear, there were a flurry of video responses to it. And so I watched one from this channel called Abbapreach, who were directly responding to Philip DeFranco's video. Now, if you see my other videos, you know I've mentioned before that I watch a lot of these commentary channels where I generally agree on the premise being presented, but not always on the specific points being used to argue that premise. And this is kind of one of those channels for me. Usually I'll agree with whatever stance these guys are making. If they see something in the world and they make a video about how that thing is bad, I tend to agree that, yeah, that thing is bad, but I don't always agree with how they prove that that thing is bad, or the response that needs to be had in order to rectify this bad thing. There really isn't a channel that I can say that I always agree with in everything. And that's a huge reason why I wanted to make my channel. But anyway, all of that is besides the point. The point is that I watched their video, and in it they essentially just defended their right to make jokes about this entire situation. And so them and their audience share the same sentiment that Philip DeFranco's audience had as well. But it was after watching this video that I felt compelled to make a comment. Because again, there are parts where I agree and there are parts where I disagree. And so this comment basically sums up my feelings on the entire situation. Now, it's a little long, so bear with me. But basically I said, I actually think that addressing the over meme-ification of these public events is a good thing. In my opinion, reducing everything to purely entertainment is an unhealthy and unempathetic way to view these situations. Where I have a problem is that we suddenly felt the need to address this now, at a moment when that meme-ification is being directed at a woman who is claiming to be a victim of domestic abuse. Where was this energy when Will Smith was getting dragged in the media for getting cheated on? He basically became the new Jordan cryface meme. Where was this energy when Kanye was suffering a very public mental breakdown after his divorce? The amount of cuck slander that was thrown around at that time was absurd. So I won't tell people not to make jokes. That has never worked and will never work. But I do think that the less we view these situations as entertainment, the less likely we are to make jokes about them in the first place. And so I just want to highlight 3 main takeaways from that comment. The first is that I do think that this meme-ification needs to be called out. The second is that I do think that this meme-ification highlights our tendency to view these situations solely through the lens of entertainment, instead of as a situation where people are very publicly going through an extremely painful and emotional experience. And the third takeaway is that I find it highly suspicious that the meme-ification is being called out now in this situation, despite us having ample opportunity to do it before. I mentioned it in that comment, but I think the Will Smith case is the best example of this. If you go back before the Oscars back in 2020, when that infamous infamous Red Table Talk first came out, and Jada Pinkett Smith admitted to everybody, without any of us really asking, that she had gotten into an entanglement with a hip-hop artist who was 21 years younger than her, who was one of their son's best friends, who was living in their house at the time, and who was dealing with some issues with his mental state. Now, as Jada Pinkett Smith is explaining the situation, the camera cuts to Will's face, showing this image. And this image will now go down in history because it immediately became a meme. At that point, the Michael Jordan cry face had become one of the internet's most popular memes. It was ubiquitous, okay? Everybody knew what that meme was. And yet this image of Will Smith distraught as he listens to his wife explain her entanglement to not just him, but also to millions of people who are watching this and who will watch this, ended up replacing the Jordan meme. And it is appropriately named Sad Will Smith. But where was the mainstream media in this case? Were they calling for people to stop? Were they telling people not to laugh at the heartbreak, turmoil, and insecurities of a person being brought up in front of everybody? Were they making any errant claims about how this could be damaging for anybody who is seeking some kind of relationship therapy? Because these are the emotions that you're going to experience. And clearly we as a society don't really care that much if you're hurt, especially if your pain can bring us some joy and laughter. Was there any of that being discussed in the mainstream media at the time? Was there a concerted effort over a short period of time where all these news outlets would come out in defense of Will Smith? No, of course, none of that was there. And as it turns out, some of them were laughing too. So the question then has to be, why now? What's the difference? I mean, I have my suspicions, but I'm not confident enough in the merit of those suspicions to publicly exclaim them just yet. But if I ever find enough evidence to support my claims, I'll definitely put a video out about it. But at least for now, that reason doesn't really matter. All that matters now is that this is inconsistent messaging from the mainstream media. If they were genuinely worried about this phenomenon, then I find it hard to believe that they wouldn't have addressed this sooner, given the numerous instances where the public schadenfreude has taken precedence over the public denigration of an individual. And it's that inconsistency, along with the dubious and unfounded claims that the mainstream media is making, that leads me to believe that they aren't really being honest about their objection to the memeing, mocking, and ridiculing that's happening now with Amber Heard. And it's a shame because, again, I think this is a noble cause. Again, I do think that this meme-ification should be called out and addressed, but not to erase or downplay the inconsistencies in Amber Heard's testimony, or to attack the people who point out those inconsistencies and irresponsibly label them as diehard Johnny Depp fans. And the unfortunate reality is that when you use an otherwise just cause to defend an unjust situation, people will inherently turn on the cause itself, no matter how just, which ironically makes the mainstream media very similar to Miss Heard in this case, in that it has inadvertently done irreparable damage to the very thing that it was trying so hard to defend. And I think that's just what tends to happen when you're disingenuous with your beliefs. But in any case, I think that's going to be it for this one. If you made it this far, I really appreciate you watching. Again, the whole point is that I kind of agree and disagree with both sides, and so I can't fully commit to either camp. And so I guess what that looks like practically is, I do think that based on the objective evidence coming out now, Amber Heard has misrepresented her relationship with Johnny Depp, which has done irreparable damage to his life and his career, and I think there need to be consequences for that. I'm not a judge or a lawyer or anybody involved in the legal system, so I don't know what those consequences should be, but I do believe consequences need to be imposed. I also don't really believe in an eye for an eye, and so even though she's slandered him in the public eye, I don't necessarily think that that means she deserves to be slandered in return. I think the truth coming out is enough, and the fact that in many cases it disagrees with her already makes her look bad enough. And so I don't really think that mocking or ridiculing her is necessary, since the truth is already doing a good enough job of that. That's an opinion I have, and I'm sure that there are tons of opinions that disagree with me, and that's fine. But yeah, I guess that's what this haul looks like practically. I just don't really feel comfortable memeing or mocking or ridiculing her publicly, despite what she's done. But yeah, anyway, before I ramble on for another 20 minutes about this, I'm just gonna end it here. Again, thank you for watching. I hope this made sense, but with that said, I wish you all the very best going forward. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.